I could hear the murmur of the audience through the velvet curtains, a low ocean of voices rising and falling. The stage manager peeked his head in, giving me a reassuring nod. 5 minutes, Madison, he said. Madison Carter. My name. Tonight, it wasn't hidden at the bottom of a guest list or scribbled on a badge no one read. Tonight, it was the headline, printed in gold on banners that draped the lobby. I adjusted the silk sleeve of my emerald blouse, fingers brushing over the cool fabric like it could anchor me. Funny, isn't it? The way the mind works. Here I was, poised, successful, invited to command the stage at one of the biggest events of the year, yet my chest still hummed with the memory of a different night. A night when I stood in almost this exact position, invisible, dismissed, painfully aware of how small they thought I was. My phone buzzed on the dressing table, screen lighting up with a name I hadn't seen in years. I froze, pulse quickening. Of all nights, of all moments, the universe has a cruel sense of timing. I drew in a breath, steady, practiced, the way I'd learned to control not just my voice but my presence. Because tonight, there was no hiding. Tonight, they couldn't look away. They ignored me once. But tonight, I am the headliner. It was 3 years ago, though it feels like a lifetime. I was 23, still clinging to the belief that talent and hard work were enough to earn a seat at the table. That night, I had been invited, or rather, allowed, to attend a local industry gala in Los Angeles. It wasn't the Grammys, not even close, but for me, it felt like the beginning of everything. I had spent the week saving up for the right dress, a sleek black satin number that still smelled faintly of department store perfume. My heels pinched with every step, but I convinced myself that pain was part of the price of ambition. I remember arriving early, clutching the small clutch my grandmother had given me, soft beige leather, worn smooth from years of her own use. Carry this when you need strength, she had told me. It has a way of reminding you that you belong, even when the world says otherwise. But the moment I stepped into that ballroom, I realized belonging wasn't up to me. Eyes skimmed over me. Conversations closed just as I approached. I tried to introduce myself to a group of producers, my voice light but steady. They barely paused, one of them muttering, "Excuse us, sweetheart," before turning their backs. I stood there, cheeks hot, smile frozen in place. Later, I worked up the courage to approach the stage coordinator, asking if there was any chance for me to share one of my songs. She looked me over, her clipboard snapping shut. "You're not on the list," she said flatly, as though that was the end of it.
And maybe it was.
I spent the rest of the evening tucked in the corner by the buffet, watching others shake hands, exchange numbers, laugh too loudly at jokes I couldn't hear. Every rejection cut a little deeper, every ignored glance another reminder. In their eyes, I wasn't worth noticing. By the time I left, my lipstick had faded, my shoes had carved blisters into my skin, and my heart felt like it had caved in on itself. I clutched that beige clutch like it was oxygen, whispering my grandmother's words in my head. On the drive home, city lights blurring past my windshield, I made a vow. No one would ever make me feel invisible again. If they wouldn't give me a stage, I would build my own. If they wouldn't hear my voice, I would make it impossible to ignore. That night didn't break me. It built me. The morning after that event, I woke up with swollen eyes and sore feet, but also with a fire I had never felt before. My roommate, Julia, found me sitting cross-legged on the floor of our tiny apartment, notebooks scattered around me, headphones still looped around my neck. She raised an eyebrow, coffee in hand. "You didn't sleep, did you?" she asked. "No," I admitted, scribbling another line into my notebook. "I don't have time to." Julia was one of the first people who believed in me, even when I doubted myself. She pushed her glasses up her nose and sat down beside me. "Then let's figure it out. One song at a time." That became my mantra, one song at a time. One late night at a time. One rejection at a time. I took every opportunity one could get. Coffee shops, open mic nights, streaming my songs online to an audience of maybe 12 people. The applause was polite, often sparse, but every clap mattered. Every encouraging smile from a stranger reminded me why I was doing this. Still, The road wasn't glamorous. I worked double shifts as a barista just to pay rent, recording demos in my closet at night because it was the only place quiet enough. My voice cracked from exhaustion. My fingers blistered from strumming until dawn. I sent emails that were never answered, left voicemails that were never returned. But somewhere between the silence and the small victories, I grew stronger. The turning point came when Julia introduced me to Renee Porter, a retired songwriter who had once penned hits for names I had only ever read about. Renee was sharp, direct, and had little patience for excuses. The first time she listened to one of my demos, she looked at me with eyes that saw straight through my fear. "You've got raw talent," she said. "But talent isn't enough. You need grit. Are you willing to bleed for this?" "Yes," I whispered, though my voice trembled. "Good," she replied, "because you will." Under Renee's mentorship, I learned discipline. She tore apart my lyrics, pushed me to rewrite until the words stung with honesty. She made me sing until I understood that music wasn't just about sound, it was about truth. Slowly, the wins began to build. A small label picked up one of my singles for streaming. Then, a popular influencer used my song and video, and overnight, my plays skyrocketed into the thousands. My first royalty check was laughably small, but it was proof. People were listening. I didn't tell my family much about my progress. To them, I was still figuring things out, still that girl chasing a hobby instead of a career. I let them believe it, partly because I didn't want to face their doubt, partly because I wanted the satisfaction of proving them wrong when the time was right. I kept my updates vague, just another open mic, just another recording session. But behind the curtain of modesty, I was building something powerful. Every dollar I earned went back into my craft. Better equipment, studio time, training. The girl who once stood invisible in a crowded ballroom was gone. In her place, a woman was emerging, scarred, sleepless, relentless, but undeniable. And though no one knew it yet, I was coming for the spotlight they had once refused to give me. The room smelled of roses and stage lights. My dressing room was a quiet cocoon, insulated from the buzz of the crowd outside. Through the door, I could hear the muffled announcement. Tonight's headliner, Madison Carter. The sound of my own name rippled through the venue, and for a brief second, I closed my eyes to savor it. I hadn't expected them to come, the same faces from that night years ago. But there they were, seated in the VIP row. Daniel, the producer who once brushed me aside like lint on his jacket. Victoria, the polished PR executive who had looked right through me. Even Lila, a girl from my own hometown who had laughed when I said I wanted to sing for a living. Their eyes were on the stage, not knowing yet that I was the one about to walk into the spotlight. When I finally stepped out, the stage lights washed over me in gold, and the murmur of the audience melted into silence. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I approached the mic. I could feel hundreds of eyes tracing the silhouette of my dress, the fall of my hair, the certainty in my stride. For the first time, I wasn't trying to disappear into the crowd. I was commanding it. "Good evening," I began, my voice smooth but strong. A hush fell deeper. 3 years ago, I stood at an event not unlike this one. Only back then, no one remembered my name. I was ignored, dismissed, invisible. I let the words sink in, scanning the audience until my eyes landed on the very people who had made me feel small. Their faces shifted, recognition dawning, disbelief tightening their expressions. But tonight, I continued, pausing for effect, I'm not here to be overlooked. I'm here because you demanded me, because the world wanted my voice, and because I refused to give up. The applause erupted, crashing against me like waves. I sang that night with everything I had, the years of doubt, the countless rejections, the aching hope that had carried me here. My voice filled the hall, soaring over chandeliers and echoing into corners where I had once stood forgotten. When the final note hung in the air, the crowd rose to their feet. Cheers, whistles, thunderous claps. In the front row, Daniel sat stunned, his jaw tight. Victoria blinked rapidly, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Lila's smile was forced, brittle at the edges. After the show, I returned to my dressing room. Not long after, a knock came. I knew before I opened it who it would be. Daniel stood there, hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. "Madison," he started, clearing his throat. I didn't realize. You were incredible. We should talk about." I lifted a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Funny," I said softly. "You didn't realize 3 years ago, either." His cheeks flushed. Behind him, Victoria appeared, her voice syrupy sweet. "We'd love to discuss potential collaborations. Your career is extraordinary." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Extraordinary enough without you." The air between us grew heavy. They had once left me to wilt in the shadows. Now, they stood at my door, desperate to share the glow of my light. And I held the power they had once denied me. They hovered in my doorway like nervous students awaiting judgment. For a moment, I just studied them. Their polished suits, their carefully rehearsed smiles, the faint tension in their shoulders. These were the same people who once treated me as though my presence was an inconvenience. Now they waited for my permission to enter my world. I leaned back in the velvet chair, crossing my legs with slow precision. "Come in," I said finally, my tone measured. Daniel stepped forward first, voice eager, words tumbling too fast. "We'd love to sign you, Madison. We can get you into bigger venues, international tours, brand partnerships. You name it." I tilted my head. "Interesting. Where was that enthusiasm when I asked you for 5 minutes of your time?" His mouth opened, then closed. No answer. Victoria jumped in smoothly, her charm as polished as ever. "We underestimated you. It happens. But now that we see your potential, we'd like to work together. It could be mutually beneficial." I smiled, but there was no softness in it. "Mutually beneficial," I repeated. "That's convenient wording. But let me be clear, I don't need saving. I don't need validation. And if we're going to talk about working together, there are conditions." Their eyes flickered with curiosity and unease. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. "Condition 1, respect. Not just for me, but for every young woman who walks into a room with a dream. You don't dismiss her. You don't belittle her. You listen." Victoria's smile faltered. Daniel shifted in his chair. "Condition 2, authenticity. If you work with me, you don't get to reshape me into your version of a marketable product. I am who I am, and that's exactly why the audience connects with me." I saw Daniel swallow hard, his jaw tightening. "And condition 3, I said, my voice steady, growth. You don't get to ride my success unless you're willing to change. Toxic habits, empty promises, manipulative deals, that ends here. If you want a piece of my journey, you start by rewriting the way you treat people." The silence in the room was thick. For once, they had no scripts, no easy lines to fall back on. "Those are my terms," I finished, standing to signal the end of the conversation. "Take them or walk away. Either way, I'll be just fine." Daniel glanced at Victoria, his pride clearly warring with his desperation. Finally, he gave a stiff nod. "We'll consider it." I walked to the door and opened it for them, a subtle gesture of control. As they filed out, I added, "And one more thing. This time, I'm the one deciding who belongs in the room. Don't forget that." Their footsteps echoed down the hallway, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cologne and the unmistakable taste of shifted power. For the first time in years, I felt not just seen, but unshakably in command. The weeks that followed were quieter, in a way. The noise of applause faded, the headlines cooled, but something inside me stayed lit, steady, unshakable. I started noticing small changes. Lila, the girl from my hometown who once mocked me, sent me a message, not to beg for attention, but to admit she'd started singing at local cafes. "You made me believe it's possible," she wrote. I stared at the words for a long time, remembering how her laughter once stung. Now, it didn't. Daniel and Victoria resurfaced, this time softer, less polished, less certain. They didn't demand, they asked. Not for control, but for advice. I kept my distance, but I noticed a shift. Maybe they were learning. Maybe my conditions had forced them to look at the way they treated others. One evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the beige clutch resting on the table beside me. Its leather was even more worn now, the clasp slightly tarnished, but it carried the same weight as the night my grandmother placed it in my hands. I traced its edges with my fingertips, breathing in the memory of her voice. "It will remind you that you belong." She was right. I had belonged all along. It just took time for me to see it. I thought back to the girl I was at that first event, hiding in the corner, swallowing tears, aching for anyone, to notice me. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her, don't be afraid of being ignored. Be afraid of giving up before your light finds the right stage. The next show loomed ahead, bigger than the last, but I no longer carried the weight of proving myself. The stage was no longer a battlefield. It was home. As I stood before the mirror that night, fastening the clasp of my grandmother's clutch, I smiled at my reflection.
Strong. Certain. Whole.
And when the announcer's voice thundered once again, "Ladies and gentlemen, your headliner, Madison Carter," I stepped into the spotlight without hesitation, because they had ignored me once. But now, I am the headliner.